Today we're joined by Rhydon Atzenhoffer, better known as Ramblin' Rhino.
And I've worked everything from sweeping a broom in a warehouse to driving a truck, working a counter, running a branch.
If you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans.
I certainly never imagined myself as a podcaster or any kind of industry influencer or anything like that. I knew what had to be done, and I was going to help make sure it was done the right way.
You were out there at age 12, running crews.
You're not going to learn how to do it just thinking you can't do it. Go do it.
Hey guys, welcome to The Dispatch, where job site legends get the mic. Join me every other Thursday as I sit down with the biggest names in the trades to find out what's really happening to keep America running. So whether you're on the road or in the garage beer in hand, settle in for a great conversation. I'm Ryan Prosser, and this is The Dispatch. Welcome back to The Dispatch, where job site legends get the mic. Today we're joined by Rhydon Atzenhoffer, better known as Ramblin' Rhino, a leader in HVAC distribution and market growth with over 20 years in the game, and the voice behind HVAC R&D Podcast, one of the top shows in the trade. Rhydon, thanks for being on the show.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
So right off the bat, I got to ask you, do you think is it HVAC or is it HVAC? How do you pronounce it in your head?
Most of the time I say HVAC, but there's those moments where some people need it spelled out. So I think you got to keep both of them in your back pocket for the situation.
So we had a guest on the show a couple weeks ago, and he said it's HVAC because it's an acronym and you don't pronounce acronyms. And I was sort of stumped in the moment. I was like,
that's a good argument.
But here, listen, to folks out there, I think it's like we're 2 or 3 episodes down the road. Guys, right off the bat, MILF. All right, let's start with that. Nobody's okay. So I spent some time on the beach over spring break with my kids, thinking, well, hang on, there must be some acronyms that we pronounce. Okay, so that's one end of the spectrum, and then I recently found out another one that I did not realize. The country of Pakistan is an acronym. So the P, the A, the K, the whole thing, each one stands for a different thing. It's like Punjab, Afghan, Kush, and on it goes. And I had no idea. So there is a country out there.
I've never heard that ever. So I guess I'm also getting educated today. This is fantastic.
Dude, right off the bat. Here we go. So, all right. So, Rhydon, for folks that don't know, give us a little background on yourself.
So my name is Rhydon Atzenhoffer. I grew up in a family trades business in the mountains of North Carolina. Pretty much was riding a shotgun in a work truck from 5 all the way through college. And then after I graduated, I moved into distribution in 2010, 2011. And I've worked everything from sweeping a broom in a warehouse to driving a truck, working a counter, running a branch. The majority of my career, I've been outside sales. I've been a division, business development leader for a couple of years. And then now I'm an account executive at a major distributor based out of the Charlotte market in North Carolina.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when we chatted previously, part of your backstory was, that you guys, people don't talk about this. It's almost like it didn't happen. Now COVID is the major disruptive force of the last, but for younger folks, they may forget that the 2008 financial crisis was a big deal at the time. And if I remember correctly, that had a major impact on your career early on, didn't it?
So it did. So I was still in college in 08, 09 and graduated in 2010. But where we were in our market in Western North Carolina, a lot of our business was built around secondary homes that were $1 million homes around the lakes of Western North Carolina. And when the housing market crashed, it took, a year or so for it to really hit the rural areas of Western North Carolina. But when it hit it hard. And it really had some major effects on our family business. And it kind of got to a point of, as I was getting done with school, it's like, you know what, I'll go get a job. Because it felt like it was time. And, my dad and I had done a lot of things. We butted heads a little bit, which, that can happen. Especially, Dad had me later in life. So he was in his 60s and I'm in my 20s and I'm trying to help him, tell him how to run a business. That doesn't always, mesh. But I think it also was, it was time to go do something else too. I'd been in the contracting side for a while and I wanted to take the experiences that I had and the knowledge I had there and kind of move into a sales role. And we had a lot of outside sales reps over the years that had taken really good care of us, but there were things that they didn't know or didn't do that I wanted to be able to move into a sales role and kind of be more than just an order taker or a relationship guy, but I wanted to be a value added salesperson. And I wanted to have some additional business knowledge because there's a lot of guys that get into this job and they build a business, but they built themselves a job. They didn't build themselves a business. And they may be fantastic technicians, but that doesn't mean they know how to work a balance sheet. That doesn't mean they understand how to do different things. So I wanted to be able to help guys, especially that were starting out, be able to really grow and understand what they were getting into and kind of be able to add different things to them that they wouldn't get from somebody else.
There's a lot to cover there, but right off the bat, one of my favorite sayings, not necessarily from the Bible, but definitely hear religious people say this a lot, is if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. And time and again, I've gone back to that during, moments where I thought I had it figured out and everything went to heck in a handcart. And, you look back 5 years later and you're like, what is it? Garth Brooks said, some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers.
Yeah. No, that's true.
What did, well, expand on that then, if you would, because I'm sure circa 2008 you had plans that were going a different way, right? You were going to stay in the family business, maybe take that a certain direction, and that all just went to hell. And here you are having really made something of yourself probably in a direction you did not think you were headed. What did that look like? What can you report back 20 years later, post financial crisis?
Well, and really, at the time, we were considering opening a secondary office, and I was going to run a secondary office in the Highlands Cashers area of North Carolina because there was a lot of additional high-end business there for change-outs, retrofit. We'd done a lot of work for contractors that were retrofitting, 100-year-old homes and doing different things. And it's kind of very similar to, doing secondary large homes around the lakes. There's a lot of secondary large homes in that part of the state as well. But as things started to change, those ideas evaporated really quick. So, I didn't, ever imagine myself as an outside sales rep really until the opportunity kind of came to fruition and I started to discuss it with people. I certainly never imagined myself as a podcaster or any kind of industry influencer or anything like that. The podcast all started at, the next major crisis event as we talk about COVID changing everything. That's where the podcast showed up. So, I think that God has a plan for us. We don't know what it is. And, our job is to do the best to listen to what he shows us and try to take his lead. He's going to put us where he wants to put us, and there may be tough times in life. There's going to be good times in life, but all of that's to teach you about something else you got to learn for later.
What can you tell folks about the more corporate side of things? We have a lot of listeners we hear from a lot whose experience seems more in line with your early, well, I got to be careful with you saying early career because you were out there at age 12, running crews,
So
which I got questions
I
about
ran
that.
I was running new construction roughing crews when I was 12, 13 years old. Because I had been.
How do you command respect as a 12-year-old? Like, what are the things where you're like, I would stay in my lane. These are the things. But, like, surely you're not, like, bowing up on these guys. Do what I say or else, right? Because you're a pipsqueak.
No.
You're built high on these guys.
No, it was tough. It was very tough. So I had a couple instances where, we had hired new helpers, and I'm sure it was tough for a guy in his 30s to be a helper to a 12-year-old. I completely get that. Totally get that. And I remember we were doing a house. I'm trying to remember where it was. It wouldn't matter. No one's going to know where it is anyway. But we went to this house kind of up in the middle of nowhere. And, I laid out, I said, look, this is going to be what you're doing on this side of the house. Like, this is what I'm going to handle on this side of the house. And then, we'll come back at lunch, kind of see where we are with everything and go from there. So, I'm running what I'm running. He's doing what he's doing. Lunchtime, take a break, and I go look at everything he's put up there. And I'm like, but half this is going to have to come down. Probably all of it's going to have to come down because he didn't have his flex stretched out. Stuff wasn't strapped up. Stuff was laying all over the place. It wasn't clean lines. And if there's anything my father taught me, it's how to put a duct system in the right way. So I was like, look, we're going to have to fix all this. He's like, well, what do you know? You're just a kid. And I said, okay, fine. I was like, when dad gets here, it's like, he's going to tell you the same thing I'm telling you right now, but that's fine. And I stopped. There was no point in arguing because I wasn't going to get anywhere. So
Right.
about an hour later, here comes dad rolling up to the job site to check out what's going on. And he goes and he's looking through my side. He's like, all right, this looks good. He goes through and walks over the other guys. He's like, you're going to have to pull all this shit down. The guy's like, seriously? He's like, that's what your kid said. He's like, well, why didn't you listen to him? He's been doing it a lot longer than you. But it's that wasn't always the easiest conversations. And I mean, I ran install crews from really 12 until 18. And, as I got a little bit older, it was easier because some of the guys had worked with us for a while and they knew that I wasn't there to give them grief. It was just, I knew what had to be done and I was going to help make sure it was done the right way. But it was a struggle for years to get people to really want to buy in and listen, at least the first couple of times.
It's we're in an interesting moment in sports history right now, watching a twilight of his career, LeBron. And I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm the biggest LeBron fan. But I'm not a LeBron hater either. I just, I think the MJ versus LeBron debate is overblown because it's MJ, and anybody that wants to argue that is insane. But and we could do a whole episode on that. I don't know how we would possibly slice it as fitting into HVAC in any way, but I would love to weigh in on that topic. But I do wonder, certainly LeBron is one of the top players, probably top three. But what strikes me is, I remember I went to the University of Texas and I was at the Final Four where Texas lost to Syracuse behind an unbelievable athlete named Carmelo Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
And also in that same Final Four was Marquette behind Dwayne Wade. And those guys would both declare for the draft that year. And a young man out of high school by the name of LeBron James was in that same draft class. And I was in college. I was in college at that Final Four. And yet, here we are all these years later, LeBron's still kicking. When you've been in the game as long as you have, I mean, can you even remember a time before? I know you've switched. You're not exactly doing the same, but you're in the space. Like, I mean, do you feel a little bit like the LeBron of HVAC?
That's a funny joke. I'm definitely not the LeBron of HVAC, but no, I honestly can't remember a time in life when then this wasn't a part of it that I truly remember. Because I mean, like I said, from the moment I could move, I think I was HVACing in the womb probably. But it's always been a part of my life, and I've always said that this trade has literally given me everything in life, and it's no joke. It's like I was born into it, and I've done nothing but it forever, and it's part of who I am, one way or another.
So, as you've transitioned to the sales side, this is what I was going to ask about, and the 12-year-old thing. I had to, that's just such an unusual aspect.
It is.
For folks out there looking at the trades, I think people think tool belt, duct tape, doing the thing, basically what your first 10 years was. What they don't think about is the sales side, the more customer-facing side as much. What can you report? And, if you were going to talk to folks that are interested in the trades, maybe they're in the trades and looking at different angles in it, like what has worked well for you, and what does life look like in that role?
Well, I think especially trying to convince people that there's more than just turning a wrench in this industry is something that I've talked about a lot in my career. It's really something that I've talked about a lot more the last couple of years. I've been, very blessed to be able to be part of AHR's workforce development through the AHR Expo the last 3 or 4 years now. I worked with another manufacturer and donated a lot of equipment to an inner city school in Chicago. And I got to go and speak with the kids at this school. And the main topic of my discussion with them wasn't necessarily get into HVAC, but it was like, here are the things that you can do with this knowledge that no one's telling you. When you go and you get into a community college or a high school and you're doing a trade program, the majority of what you're taught is you're going to go and turn a wrench and you're going to go in the field, and this is your only option with this knowledge. The problem is you can do a whole lot more with it. They just don't teach you that. Just like you said, people don't know that, you need people in distribution. They don't know you need people that work for manufacturers, being manufacturers reps. They also don't think about all the support roles for those other businesses. So I had a discussion with a young woman in one of these classes, and I was like, what did you want to do, or what's your plan for when you grow up? What do you want to do? She's like, well, I want to do marketing. I was like, fantastic. I said, what you don't realize is that if you understand this industry, you can go right into a marketing job for this industry. Easy peasy. Because you have a hands-on knowledge that most marketing people don't. So if you know how to market, but you also understand the people you're marketing to, that makes you that much more valuable. So a lot of people don't realize you can take the skills you learn, and maybe you're in the field a year or two, and this is not your thing. Well, go be a counter guy in distribution. Go work your way into a sales role. Go work for a manufacturer's rep. Go teach people about products, sell the distributors, because all those different roles exist. There's just almost as many roles on this side of it as there are out in the field.
Mm-hmm. How do people find out about that, though? Like that I always look at people with your background and dad kind of got you into it, and that wasn't really available to me. I'll do a whole episode on that another day. But like, so I'm 18 and I'm like, I don't know anything. I actually think I knew a negative amount of things because I either didn't know or the things that I thought I knew were wrong. So like I knew a negative amount of information at age 18, and I didn't even know where to go to get information about what was possible for me. I guess let me ask it to you like this. If somebody's 18, okay, they're just coming out of high school, what in the world do you advise that they even do to educate themselves on the opportunities that are out there and how they can assess what's a good fit for them?
And I want to put that back on guidance counselors in our school system, because they should be educating kids on what opportunities are, but most of them don't.
Well, Rhydon, like so many things, the system should be doing it, but it's
System should
falling
be doing
to
it,
us.
but it doesn't.
It's falling to us podcasters to pick up the slack here. So
No, I completely agree.
Let's save America's youth one episode at a time. What should these 18-year-olds, they're interested in the trades, they don't know where in God's name to begin, what kind of trade, what kind of role, what would you suggest?
If they're truly interested in a trade, whether it's heating and air conditioning, electrical, plumbing, carpentry, any of that, the summer after high school, go see if you can work for a contractor. One, if it's something you truly want to know if you want to do, go see if you can work for a contractor. That's the first one. Find a local contractor, call them, say, hey, are you hiring? See if you can be an apprentice for a summer. See if there's internship programs. The other thing is look and see if there's any kind of community job fairs, or if there's a job fair at a local community college or at a local high school or local college, any of those different things. A lot of that stuff really wasn't around that much even 15, 20 years ago. It's a lot more prevalent now than it was before. And there's a lot more different foundations now that even if you get online and, look for trade programs for high schoolers, or if you want to search, where can I get information on the trades, you can find those things a lot more now than you ever could before. The biggest thing is it's not going to get dropped in your lap. You got to go look for it. No one's going to just tell it to you. You got to go find it, and you got to do some research.
Yeah, I think the research piece is the most important and hardest. I do wonder, it seems like AI, I think the GPTs of the world are getting pretty good at, you describe a scenario and they kind of reflect back to you some answers. Hey, I'm good at these things. I'm not good at these things. What should I be looking at? And I don't know if you've experimented with this at all, but one of the things I tell young folks is go download ChatGPT. It's free, okay? And just tell it a little bit about yourself and what you're trying to solve for. And worst case scenario, you're like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But usually you're going to be like, wow, this is like some actionable advice, like I remember growing up, man. I just to like illustrate bad advice, and I'm real curious what the audience has got to say about bad advice from your dad about women. Okay, this is a little breakout session. I don't. My dad was an engineer. Okay, he's a mechanical engineer, worked for NASA. That is like the trifecta of don't know anything about women. Like that is the if you were. And so this guy, and my mom, the thing is a great looking woman. I don't know if she felt bad or what the deal was. But so, I'm like getting to be a little bit older, 14, 15, starting to look at chicks and stuff. And, and my dad, of course, dads pick up on that. Oh, you think Stephanie's, and I was like, oh, yeah, I kind of. And he's like, look, this was his advice. And he stuck with this for a very long time. You got to find out what kind of candy she likes. So first of all, like just spare a thought for this 14-year-old, like really awkward kid that's going up to chicks asking what kind of candy they like. I mean, now this is just like, I mean, you would get roasted on social. They go on Facebook and be like, Ryan's, asking what in the world. Second of all, this isn't what girls want. I mean, I've never to this day had a girl be like, listen, if a guy would just ask what kind of candy, that's all And I think he had it in his head that like a box of chocolates and, you're in the game kind of a thing. And listen, I'm going to tell you guys a couple of things. But first thing is, I didn't realize this till later, how important this is. My dad's 6 feet tall, 6'1". That is why his stupid candy thing was working, because chicks are into tall dudes, period. Right. And so here's this tall, good-looking guy who says a bunch of stupid shit, but it didn't matter what he was saying. Young guys, listen. Number one, ditch the candy thing. Number two, eat healthy. Try to get as tall as you can, because I think that might be all that really matters from what I can tell. But the bigger thing is, kids now have a place they can go to get some wisdom. And AI does a pretty decent job. It just does. And I know everybody doesn't want to hear that necessarily. But if you want to get some guidance about, like, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm trying to do, it's not terrible. I see you nodding your head. What's been your experience so far?
No, I agree. And I felt like I kind of resisted using AI stuff for a while. I've dug a lot more into it the last couple of years, especially, as I started trying to grow and do different things with the show. There's a lot of things I don't always have time to do everything for. So if there's ways that I can, assist myself with some automation here and there, and I feed it what I want and build the things I want to do, but it, helps me get stuff scheduled quicker. It helps me do other things. There's a lot of assistance that it can give you, especially if you're kind of feeding it what you want out of it too. In terms of doing research, things like that, you can find a lot more information. It's just, I think you have to sometimes be careful with it, because it can also just tell you what you want to hear if you ask it certain things certain ways. So I think you have to be strategic in how you go to I guess using AI with what you want it to do for you.
I mean, this show, obviously, as the audience has heard, sponsored by FieldMind. And one of the things that it's great at, there's one thing that it's great at that's obvious, and one thing that it's great at that isn't obvious, that both are huge benefits. But one is, if you're trying to get started, you're in your first 10 years of your career. I mean, 10 years, a long time. You don't know everything, and you're working on complex systems, and you want something that can provide a very direct answer or very direct step-by-step instructions on how to approach something. It is fantastic at providing that. You don't need to go dig through a 250-page manual or whatever the case is. But the thing that's less obvious that AI really helps with is these younger guys don't have to always be calling the older guys anymore. Yep. So you talk to the older guys that when their companies are using FieldMind, and they say, I'm getting calls 4 times a week. It used to be 25. This episode is brought to you by FieldMind, built for the hands that keep America running. FieldMind gives your field service techs ready access to technical documentation, service history, and your team's best tribal knowledge right where they are, in the field. FieldMind is the tool for field service techs. Learn more at fieldmind.com. You know, and I can now actually focus on doing this, you know, the things that I want to be doing. And when you talk to the younger guys, they're saying, listen, I just needed somewhere to go for answers. You know, something that can be my companion in this journey. And I think back to the 90s, man. Like, I mean, this will blow your mind if you're a Z. You know, I have been an adult longer than Google has been around as a company. So, like, there was a time in my adult life when Google was if somebody would have said Google to you, I mean, it meant like the
googly
funny eyes on it.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? But, you know, and so this AI thing now, I do think I sit right in the middle in this issue, maybe slightly biased towards the AI, but like I see that this thing is, you know, this needs to be managed correctly, you know, and it's not about replacing people. This is about enhancing skills that are already there. This is about taking people on a journey so they can be better, get farther, faster than they would have otherwise gotten. But well, go ahead, Red.
Well, I was going to say, so I was messing around with the app earlier today because I didn't want to come on here and, you know, not, you know, admit that, well, you know, that's great. I'm on this show. I don't know what the app does. No idea. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is, you know, you talk about guys aren't getting the phone calls for advice they used to get. In a lot of cases, stuff like FieldMind is almost better than calling and asking those questions sometimes because, unfortunately, we have, you know, this innate ability to have bias with things. So you may call a guy that's been in the trade for 30 years and he hears this problem and he thinks back to a time that he heard this problem before and just assumes it's the same answer that he found when he did it this one time 20 years ago. And he tells you that's what it is. And then you go and do that and you think you've got it fixed. And then a week later, you're back out on the same unit. And you're like, well, why the hell didn't this fix it? Because a lot of times, unfortunately, we get lucky in this business a lot. And, you know, especially as technology has changed more in the last 10 years than it did the first 20 that I was doing this stuff. And it's not getting any slower. And a lot of times if you're asking a person, they're going to go back to all these different things they've experienced and not necessarily look at it with a fresh mind. Because it's difficult to do that as a person. You don't want to throw out your experiences and the things you know and not use that for what you're looking at. The difference is if you go into FieldMind, and I, like earlier today, one of the things I threw into it was, I said, look, I think I've got a control board that failed on low voltage dropout. You know, do you have a manual for this model number of a unit? Is there anything in the manual that might give me an error code I should look at to maybe justify this? What can you tell me? And it just, here it comes. It tells me, like, look, it may be an E5 code based on this. You know, go through, check this, check this, check this. But it lets it kind of level out and look at it from a blank perspective. And a lot of times when I tell people when they're going in and they're learning service is go through sequence of operations. Don't just assume you're going to get to the answer. Literally walk through it from the beginning to the end.
That's right.
That's really how you find it. And if you're a young tech and, you know, all you're doing is maintenances, do walk through sequence of operations on the maintenance. Just get your mind used to it. But that'll help you, especially when you get a tool like FieldMind later on in your career. You can bundle all that into one, and it just makes it so much easier and quicker.
I totally agree. You know, speaking of biases, my producer is quickly becoming more popular than I am. So she's got her own fan base she needs to give some shout outs to. Susie, microphone's yours.
Hi, everyone. So we have a couple audience questions, but before I want to give a quick shout out to some of our listeners online. Big thanks this week to Ductwork Dawn, Install to Owner, and Trade Life Trevor. We really appreciate you being part of the community and supporting the dispatch. If you want us to shout out your name, just follow us on Instagram at feelmind_app. So are you guys ready for some questions here? Hey guys, this is Jake from Memphis. I'm coming off an injury and might have to move out of the field. Sales got brought up. My boss thinks I could be good, but I've never thought about it. Where do you even begin?
Go do it. Why not? You're not going to learn how to do it just thinking you can't do it. Go do it. Especially if someone believes you have the capability to go do sales, it means more than likely you're good with people. If you're good with people, then you could be a salesperson. Just be honest and truthful with them and help them find a solution. Don't say this is your only answer. Provide solutions to their comfort problem in their home. And if you provide consistent, positive communication and solutions to the homeowner and solve problems, you'll never have an issue.
I totally agree. I'll just add to it, and this is for Jake, and this is for some of the others out there in the audience. I came up through a sales path in my career as kind of the primary, way I came up, and what you would hear over and over is, I don't have the big personality. I'm not like a schmoozy. I don't know how to influence people. Things like this. This is what you would hear over and over and over. And I would say, man, listen, those are some of the worst salespeople. Like what you're channeling right now is every bad car buying experience that you've ever had. And you're like, well, he almost got me into that Corvette. I'm glad that I didn't, or I wish I hadn't, or whatever. But that like high pressure, ingratiate yourself model is really like at best B-level sales guys. Like the A grade guys are never that way. And like if you go to a restaurant, and I'm not talking about fine dining, it could be any restaurant, that like I mean frankly some of the like Texas barbecue joints do this great, but it's like understanding the product, understanding the problems, asking questions, but not schmoozy, not like, hey, some stretch of weather, but you're like, what is it that you're interested in, trying to understand the problem that you're solving. And, like waiters that know the food at their restaurant well. Oh, with turkey sandwich here's amazing. I'd stay away from the tuna, whatever the case. Like you have information that the person, by the way, I always love it when waiters give me the like, look when I ask about something. I'm like, great, thank you. Like don't tell me that everything is great. I know there's a couple of duds on here, guide me away from the landmines, but it's been my experience that if you take the time to learn your product, you take the time to really, when you're talking with customers, understand the problems they're trying to solve. Often it requires follow-up questions, active listening. Those things are like gold. They're gold. And like if you're a bit dry in the personality department, first of all, that can often come across in a good way because it comes across as knowledgeable because you're straight to the facts, high signal to noise ratio, like your stuff. I don't know, to the Jakes of the world, I would say, learn your products inside and out and try to become good at asking questions that are pointed at understanding the core problem somebody's trying to solve. Those are the things that make great salespeople. Rhydon, what's your take?
Well, and I'll add to that too, especially since you have field experience. A lot of people get into sales in this industry, whether on the contracting side or the distribution side, and they have zero field experience. One of your greatest assets is that you know what it actually takes to do the job. So it makes it, it's a different sell in some ways because you understand what it's going to take to actually provide the solution that you're talking to this homeowner about. So you can talk at it and talk to them at a different level and be like, we can do this and this is how we can do it and why we need to do it this way. You're not just giving them an answer without having the backup of when they say, well, why do we have to do it that way? You actually know why. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot deeper understanding of the process because you started in the field. And that makes you more effective as a salesperson, especially once you really know the rest of that product inside and out to provide a solution.
I think I totally agree. I think in the interest of time, we got Susie, time for one more question?
Yes. What's up, dispatch crew? Matt from Arizona. I see guys who stay techs forever and others who move up fast. What are they doing differently early on? I don't want to look up in 10 years doing the same thing.
So first of all, Ryan, I gotta say, HVAC tech in Arizona, is this the safest job on the face of the earth?
I mean, I would think you're pretty busy most of the time. Just
It's not
throwing that
getting any
out there.
colder.
No,
That
just
is,
throwing that out there. Yeah.
it is. I mean, I think about like the hottest part of the richest country in the world. That guy is gonna have work probably for the rest of his life. That's not the question. But when I see these Arizona guys, I'm like, man, this is a good business to be in, Matt. But to his question, what's your take?
I think the biggest thing is, what do you actually want to achieve in your career? Where do you want to be? You know, you're saying you look at these guys that have been technicians for 20, 30 years, but some of those guys, that may have just been their plan. They like being a technician. They don't want to be in a management role. They don't want to deal with people. They just want to go get on a rooftop, fix a unit, and go home. Or they want to get on a rooftop, change out a unit, and go home. They may not want that. Now, if you have aspirations to be more than a technician and you want to be service manager, install manager, you want to get your license, you want to own a business, then, you know, talk to the people that have been in those roles and figure out, you know, how did they get there? What are some paths that you can take to learn and follow along in the footsteps of people that you want to follow? Does that mean you shouldn't talk to the guy that's been a tech for 20, 30 years? Absolutely not, because he's got more knowledge than you'd ever imagine. And you know what you may or may not know is, hell, they may have tried to go out and start their own business at one point, and they just decided they didn't like it, and they went back to being a tech. So I think the biggest thing is, you need to figure out what your 10-year plan is, what your 5-year plan is, and decide how you want to get there. And then talk to the people that have done what you want to do. And that's how you kind of learn and build your path to do that. You're not just going to get handed a management role. You're not going to get, you know, handed anything else. You've got to go figure out what you got to do to get it, and then go get it.
You know, I got two young kids. I guess my oldest is not as young as he used to be, but they seemed young to me. They definitely seemed young. So as we're taping this today, it is the back end of spring break in Montana. America has different spring breaks. Let me tell you, dude, by the time this airs, I hope this is over, but the TSA shutdown is in full effect right now, and it is absolutely brutal. And traveling with kids right now is like, you know, we don't even need to send people to prison anymore. Let's just say, you know, you committed a crime and you've now been assigned a certain number of children that you have to escort through TSA. That's your new punishment. They're gonna be like, no, dude, Rikers Island, please, Rikers Island, 3 aughts and a cot, leave me alone. Because I mean, there's just no getting. You can't even give them screens because every 10 seconds you got to move 18 inches. You know, so that then you lose the kids. So I mean, it's just unbelievably terrible. But the, you know, I am observing myself that. It seems almost like there's kind of 3 chapters to a career if you have kids. Okay, for people that don't, it's different. But you know, early in your career, you have the opportunity to learn and, you know, do things that because you like them or because you are investing in your career. You've got the latitude to make decisions. My advice to people is to seize that time, stay in that moment, in that learning and enjoying it time as long as you can. Don't worry about things you feel like you should be doing, and then you have kids, and man, the economics of having kids, I bet a lot of the audience is nodding their head right now. It is expensive, and it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts with the costs of everything. And so then, you know, you start feeling the pressure to take jobs that maybe don't fill up your cup as much, but like their management, they pay a little bit more. And I don't think most parents go in fully understanding the economics of it, and then they get into the situation. And I say this with a smile on my face, people that can't see it, but I think this is a lot of our dads. They kind of get to that fuck it age. They're like, I got my kids through high school. They're 18. I'm going to do what I like to do. I'm going to work the hours I want to work, you know, and you start to see these salty old dudes, and, you know, they kind of work the hours they want to work, you know, and then they tinker, they've got their side projects, whatever the case may be. and you could see it almost when you meet a person. You can kind of sense what stage they're in by how few fucks they still give, but when they got kids of a certain age, they got to give more. When they move on, it's a little bit less. You talked about having an older dad. That might have all looked very different for you, but that's been my experience a little bit talking with some techs. Some of these older guys, you could tell their kids have moved on, and now they're working because they like to work, but they don't want to do the stuff they don't like as much. I wonder if that has been your take as well.
That's completely true. I mean, I watched my dad live that. I mean, he loved building a business, but I mean, he also just loved fixing shit. That was it. I mean, I don't know anything he can't fix or couldn't fix or hasn't tried to fix in one way or another. He enjoyed doing this. That's why he started a business, because he started essentially as a one-man service tech, and he did refrigeration and everything else. And there weren't a lot of people where he was that did refrigeration. He just got to the point of, well, I can do this. But he's like, but shit, he's like, I'm putting 100,000 miles on a van in 2 years or less trying to do refrigeration. I'm getting phone calls at 3 a.m. to go fix a freezer. And he's like, I just don't want to do that shit anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's when he kind of scaled it back to primarily residential, light commercial. And then, we had times where we just wouldn't even, there's a lot of jobs we're just like, nah, we're not doing that. It's like, no, it's like maybe there's money in it, but there's just, do we really need it that bad?
That's right.
So
right.
I watched a lot of that, and I was of the mind like, well, Dad, we need to go do all these jobs. It's like, it's going to build the business. And it's, well, I can build it, son, but let's stay in our lane.
That's right. A lot of factors to consider. I mean, okay, so we've like transitioned. This guy was asking about management, but like, I am curious, you got an older dad. I got an older dad. And, probably a lot of folks at home do too, or whatever. I don't know that I'm ever going to retire, and I know that other countries look at America, they say, God, these are work obsessed, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Maybe that's true, but like, I enjoy it. And I just see these guys that got out the game, I'm going to play golf, I'm going to spend time with my grandkids, whatever the case may be. And that's all great. I don't personally golf, but fine for them. But like, I also see these guys and it's like, man, the lack of direction, like you need something that gives your week some structure. Is that your take? Are you on the golf train? What's your thought?
I mean, I like golf. I'm terrible at it. I like to go lose a good dozen golf balls every round. I'm fine with that. I like to get my strokes worth for the tee fee. If I'm going to pay a $50, $100 green fee, I am getting my strokes worth. I shot 120. Who cares? I had a good long day, drank a few beers, and there we go. But, my dad will be, so Cajun Joe, as he's affectionately known by everyone that listens to my show.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. He was born and raised in New Orleans. Ended up in the mountains of North Carolina, but he is truly Cajun Joe. He has Cajun Joe's Bayou Spice. He has the seasoning. He's got it all. But, he'll be 85 in like 3 weeks, and he still goes to work every day. He's had his business since 77. He still has 3 employees, does what he wants to do, and that's him. He wouldn't know what to do if he wasn't working. Mm-hmm. He likes having purpose and likes going to do and everything. And honestly, and that's been my family's history. As far as I know, anyone in my family was the same. My great uncle was a diesel mechanic into his 90s. I mean, they like going and tinkering and fixing stuff. And if you can get paid for it, why not?
Did he work in HVAC when he was still in New Orleans, or had he moved on by 77?
So he started in Avondale Shipyard in Louisiana when he got out of the Navy. So he went in the Navy when he was 16 because he couldn't stop getting in trouble. He was a boiler tender on the Midway, which is now retired in San Diego. Supposedly, as long as everything works out, I'm actually going to get to take him to his boat in December of this year and let him run me through it, which is something I've wanted to do my whole life. But he was in a shipyard for a little under a decade. He was a master marine pipe fitter and instrumentation tech, and he built control systems for ocean liners and ocean tankers. And then he worked on an oil rig for about 1.5 years with Shell. And then he worked for a company called Hooker Chemical, and he was a lead maintenance tech and eventually became like one of their national maintenance supervisors, and he would oversee plant turnarounds in Louisiana, Washington, Niagara Falls, all over the place. And he built a lot of the maintenance systems for, how they would plan on every worst case scenario and how they were going to solve it. So, I mean, he always had this number of certain parts for this machine was always in the staff or always on the shelf. He had guys that were rebuilding other ones to go back on the shelf. So, I mean, he lived all of these different careers, but he learned HVAC and everything else doing it. He was on the show, I think it was somewhere in the episodes in the 50s or 60s. It was a way back there. He said, if I did it all over again, I would have probably been an electrical engineer. He's like, I just like dealing with big electrical problems. I like the math of it. Mm-hmm. And I never knew my dad to be a math guy, but it's just, it was like, well, HVAC was the available thing and I knew how to do it. So I built a business.
Right.
It's crazy.
I mean, I was in a different life. I probably should have taken a look at engineering. The only reason I didn't is my dad was pushing it. And so that meant I wasn't going to do it. Like if I think if my dad could do it different, he would have said, okay, listen, to get Ryan to do engineering, we're just going to say the opposite of whatever that is. And he'll pivot into it on his own. But it's funny how that works. But so Rhydon, I gotta move us to a wrap here, and there's no natural, so we're just gonna do it. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Rhydon, thank you so much for being on the show. This was a hoot and a half, bro. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, I appreciate it, man, and looking forward to bringing you on R&D. And I don't have time constraints, so we can bullshit as long as we want.
I love it. Yeah. So, folks, what Rhydon's talking about, we're doing a little home and home series. Okay, so catch us here, catch us there, and we'll pick up a lot of these topics on your show if that's all right. But Rhydon, thanks again for being here. Thank you guys for listening. Join us next time as we meet with another frontline tradesman out there keeping America running. Thanks for listening to The Dispatch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with a friend in the field.